Well, welcome. My name is Amy Mitson. I'm a Senior Associate Director at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. I see the live button in the top right corner of my screen, so hopefully I'm broadcasting to you now. I'm looking forward to sharing some details with you and information about a kind of walk through the Tuck application, but also happy to answer other questions as we progress, and we'll go through some slides, and then after that we'll definitely have time for some Q&A. We are broadcasting live from my office in Tuck Hall. If I could share my screen out the window, you would see a big white tent set up out in the courtyard as we get ready for Tuck reunions this weekend. So definitely always an exciting time on campus. But happy to have you all in my audience today and tell you a little bit more about the application process at Tuck. So that's what we'll head into now. So it's definitely an exciting and challenging time. I know you are balancing work and relationships and already busy lives with research on schools, reflection, essay writing, and gathering letters of reference. In every strong application we read, the effort is certainly palpable. That said, you have opted into this process, and we thank you for that. But there are no shortcuts. Hopefully today I can provide some details that will help you navigate this process thoughtfully and confidently. As the first slide shows, kind of the six measures here of the evaluation criteria for our application. Something I absolutely want to emphasize is that Tuck's evaluation process is incredibly holistic. We thoroughly read and take into consideration your entire application. Nothing is more important than anything else, and everyone will stand out in different ways. As you can see, there are 6 general areas that we're evaluating. We look at academic excellence through your transcript and your test scores. We can evaluate interpersonal skills through the interview, of course, but also your letters of reference are full of great detail about your interpersonal skills and professional accomplishments. Others, like demonstrated leadership and accomplishments, can be seen just about everywhere in the application. And this is not a rank order. No member of our admissions committee is required to evaluate your candidacy in any particular order. This is the list of every measure in our evaluation process. So thinking about getting to know yourself, and I call owning it. The MBA application process requires a significant amount of reflection and self-discovery. So do not overlook this piece. Some of you maybe have just gone through it if you are close or have submitted your application, and others are maybe about to start the process. So thinking about what do you want from your career and life, and why this degree and why now? Your motivations behind pursuing an MBA, your post-MBA goals, and what you want to get out of the 2-year experience is a critical piece of the story you're telling about yourself. By taking the time to understand these things up front, I guarantee your application will be stronger. There's a clear difference between an applicant that's telling us what they think we want to hear and an applicant that's being authentic. If I can quote our executive director, you know, he has talked about the application a lot, of course, but thinking about a great application is not a portrait of Tuck, it is a portrait of you. So keep that in mind as you're sharing your story with us in your application. And part of the authenticity is owning who you are. There's no such thing as a perfect applicant. And as the last slide noted, we want a diverse class. An MBA is a versatile degree that can make sense for a lot of different people. We admit marketers, engineers, consultants, military veterans, those working in technology, those working in nonprofit, and that is not a comprehensive list. So the portrait of you is what I am most interested in as you progress and put your application together. A quick note on timing. So one of our application rounds has already passed. You'll see the others listed here for the early action, November, January, and April rounds. And also the bottom two deadlines are for applicants applying through the Consortium for Graduate Schools of Management. The first round there is October 15th, and the second is January 5th. Please note that the interview deadlines vary from the dates posted above. And if the committee invites you for an interview, the timing is more random and does not follow the above in a predictable way. And we're going to get more into that as we progress through the webinar here. But now we'll kind of go into the evaluation criteria a little bit more. So this is just something for you to look at here, thinking about why and what we are looking at when it comes to academics and test scores. The combination of the two are a bit of an indicator as to maybe some of your future performance in a heavily quantitative curriculum. Some applicants do not have a quantitative background, and they will use the GMAT or the GRE to knock the ball out of the park and show, yes, they're ready to perform in a quantitative measure, and a high quant score can sometimes relieve a committee member's concern when evaluating the application. With the GPA, again, as the bullet says here, it's not evaluated in isolation. We are looking at it because you probably had some experience since that final GPA. Maybe it happened a few years ago. And so the GPA is looked at, your entire transcript is looked at, and the measure of success there, the outcomes there. We see the whole picture. We see the names of the courses. We see what your university's grading scale was. We're able to see some transcripts provide a GPA on a 4.0 scale. Some transcripts provide letter scales. Some other transcripts will provide a class ranking. These are transcripts that we are familiar with, schools across the globe, and so we are well versed. Our committee has many years of experience and global exposure on our side to understand every different transcript. Do not create a GPA on a 4.0 scale if yours is not evaluated in that way from your university. International applicants, again, just noting that we're likely very familiar with your transcript. If not, we will ask questions if we have any. Study abroad terms. Typically, if you've studied abroad, that will be noted in the transcript, and the courses will be listed there, so we should see that detail. If you are from a less quantitative background, as I mentioned, there are candidates coming in from all sorts of industries and just as many diverse undergraduate majors and concentrations. So with that, you do not have to have a quantitative background to be viewed as competitive. It's a holistic process. So I will look at what are the courses, what are your major, what was the result, but also what have you done since that time, and how have you accumulated some quantitative exposure, maybe some exposure to business courses and concepts through perhaps your professional experience. And the GMAT versus GRE, we've been accepting the GMAT for many years, and the GRE for about, I believe, the last 5 years. We do not use a conversion chart to say, okay, if someone took the GRE, it equals this GMAT. It doesn't. We view the tests independently, and we will not convert the score. I was recently asked, if I have taken the GMAT twice, or someone said to me, I've taken the GMAT twice and I know that TUC combines the scores. That is absolutely incorrect. That is not a fact. We do not combine them. We're able to view them and consider them, and that is how we do it. We cannot combine the quant from one test taken with a second test taken, likewise with the verbal, to make a new composite, or I guess we'd say a total score, but I am able to see all of the scores, so I can see progress that's being made, but I won't combine them. And thinking about, is your score competitive? You can see on our website the published range for the class that was just admitted, which if I can recall it fast enough, I believe it was 620 to 780. So thinking about where you are in that range, and thinking about if you fall outside that range on the low end, maybe thinking about taking the test again. We do not have a representative enough sample of applicants submitting the GRE to provide averages to you at this time. But just, in thinking about that test and the percentiles with the GRE, just performing as strongly as you can. I'm going to move on here to work experience. Again, if you look at the published class profile, you'll see that the average number of years work experience is 5, but that's just an average. You don't have to shoot for that average. You could have less than that or more than that. So again, as I say here, quality is more important than quantity, but we are definitely looking for some professional maturity, which typically comes from having some full-time work experience. There are candidates who will contact me right out of undergrad and say, I really want to apply this year. And in most cases, I will share with them some of the things that I've seen with past competitive applicants, which is that if the majority of our applicant pool is submitting an application with professional work experience, which most are, then you wouldn't be as competitive on that measure if you didn't have any. So thinking about, absolutely a year plus is what we see as just kind of a bare minimum in being competitive with the pool. As I mentioned earlier, many industries are represented in the class at Tuck, and no industry is weighted in any way as more valuable than another. Again, it's all the experiences that you bring and your desire for the MBA and why you specifically want to study at Tuck. We have seen students be very successful at Tuck, coming from dozens and dozens of different industries. So thinking about this next bulleted list, what we want to know, we will get some of this information from your letters of reference, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But thinking about what kind of work are you doing, the challenges and responsibilities, what are your contributions? These are, thinking about this for yourself, and then kind of in these what we want to know bullets, thinking about maybe how did you respond, or how have you responded to some of those bullets in your application or perhaps in your interview conversation. So thinking about what, not just what you've contributed, but how that's added value, your learnings, the bullets listed here, those are the things that I'm thinking about when I look at your work experience and when I listen to and read about how you've expressed your work experiences. Leadership, again, that's not defined in one way. So leadership, sometimes applicants have had the opportunity to supervise others, and sometimes they haven't. Leadership can come from all sides professionally, and it can also come from outside your professional environment. Perhaps you have a long-standing volunteer commitment or organizations that you support outside of work. You can show leadership there and share that with us in the application. And now moving on to letters of reference. Again, as the first bullet point clearly states, this provides us with some additional insight into your career success and potential. And thinking about who you will choose for your recommender. Definitely someone who can speak to your work experience. Your supervisor is ideal, but there are times where candidates, do not feel comfortable, or maybe feel like they would be negatively impacted if their supervisors knew they were applying to an MBA program and thinking about leaving. Some of you may be nodding out there as you hear that. This is not unfamiliar. We see this, and it is not a deal breaker at all when it comes to your success in the application process. So letters of reference, supervisor is great, but there are definitely other options. Perhaps someone who, if you're running your own business, someone who's a supplier that you've worked with very closely, someone related to the organization who you've worked with closely. If you're working for a company and you are not able to ask your supervisor for a letter of reference, then you could ask maybe someone who is the next most senior level to you, who's maybe supervised a project that you've worked on. So there are numerous options. And the impressive title is not what I am in search of. I am in search of seeing some content and some real great detail in that letter of reference. That is a reflection that you have a relationship of some kind with this person that you're asking for a letter of reference. Going back to the notion of if you're running your own business and maybe you're involved in a family business, a parent or a sibling or an aunt and uncle, that's of course they're going to say that they love you and they're wonderful, or hopefully they would. So perhaps look another layer deeper in that, a parent or a family member maybe won't be able to provide the most unbiased recommendation. But again, every situation is unique, and later on we'll talk about the optional essay, but the optional essay is a place to use a bullet point or to explain a choice of recommender sometimes when you're not able to choose your current supervisor. Also, candidates who are applying with several, 4 or 5 years work experience, maybe more, and maybe you've had 1 or 2 employers. It's wonderful if you're able to get the current supervisor and the former supervisor. So one from each is wonderful, and if that's an option available to you, then go for it. And if it's not, that's okay too. But thinking about progression, and that's sometimes the letters of reference can help us see that very well from 2 different supervisors. Thinking about how you can help your recommenders help you, giving them plenty of notice. I know that's the 3rd bullet point. I should have moved that to the top. Giving them plenty of time. You are busy and they are busy. If this is important to you, planning is also a good thing, and giving them a lot of time. If we do not receive your recommendation in time, it is not your recommender's fault. It is something that lies with you. If we do not receive your recommendation in time, we will not be able to evaluate your application in the round that you've chosen by the deadline that you've chosen, and we would have to push your application forward to the next round. So thinking carefully about timing and giving your recommenders plenty of time, sharing the deadline with them up front, and having a conversation and asking them if they can provide you a positive letter of reference in the time that is required by TUC. So lay out all the details for them. As you continue that conversation with your chosen recommender, encourage them to use examples as the bullet reflects here, not just, yes, she did well, he did well, yes, this was a positive, this was a negative, this is an area for growth, not just simple sentences, but detail and context. So as you're having the conversation with your recommender, perhaps you remember a time when you worked together on a particularly sticky project or had a big success, and reminding them of that and saying, hey, this might be a great example to share with TUC in my letter of recommendation. Never, ever write your own letter of reference. Never provide bullet points or highlights to your recommender in an email or in a note. They could just, kind of take that word for word or cut and paste it. The problem there is that the way you write and the way you express yourself is very unique. If they were to cut and paste it, I'm going to feel something in that letter of reference that feels very familiar to how you have written your essay. So keep that in mind. Recommenders get busy and they may want to cut and paste. So don't allow them that temptation, and do not ever write your own letter of recommendation. Oops. Thanks. Just a little pause for a drink of water on my side. So telling your story and thinking about the essays. So we talked a little bit about this, but don't forget that self-analysis. Thinking about the reasons why you want an MBA, why this is the next most critical step for you. So that strong sense of why you want an MBA will help you as you dive into the essays. Why Tuck? That should be where you have the opportunity to be very specific in why Tuck would be the best place for you to accomplish your MBA. As you progress through the prompts in the application, answering the questions that we ask is very important, and not just maybe editing another essay that you've written. I know you all are busy too, but taking the time here is what will make the difference. Don't take another essay and try to kind of reword it and reshape it for the Tuck prompts. That just won't come off well. The thoughtfulness of the content and delivery of that. The content, again, comes in when you want to answer that question and answer the question in detail. And the content, and the delivery. So this needs not be an exercise in creative writing. The more straightforward, the better. I want to know what you're trying to express. Flowery language and creating scenarios for me, in imagining some aspect of a scenario you want to share, that may not be as impactful as the straightforward facts and specifics around answering the question. After you write the essay, ask someone to read it who knows you well, and maybe someone who doesn't. Maybe someone who has no idea about the MBA application process. That may be someone who looks at it and says, you know, if they say they get it, then that's a very positive sign. But if they say they don't, or they don't understand the point or why, then you may need to go back to the drawing board. But don't be afraid to get some feedback before you hit submit. And proofreading is always a good measure. There we go. So thinking about the specifics of the essay. So in the first essay, it really is that straightforward. We definitely want the details of related to your short-term and long-term goals, why you're interested in the MBA, and specifically Tuck. So we do want people who want to be specifically at Tuck, and that's why we ask, and that's why we kind of hope that you're applying to us and have specific reasons to do so, and the belief that this program is going to allow you to accomplish something unique more so than any other, and that is why you have chosen to put in the time and energy to submit this application. So we are very interested in the details, and we are reading every word. Thinking about the second essay, in that we're asking for an example of confident humility. There is no, as I alluded to earlier, and I think said specifically, no perfect application. If every applicant was perfect, I wonder why they would need to come and learn and grow in the Tuck environment and progress through their MBA. So it's great to hear that you know what your strengths are, but that you also know what your weaknesses are or what they have been, and you're able to share them in the application. It makes it very real for me on the other side when I'm reading it. It's a human reading your human application. You don't have to pretend to be anything. It won't come off as authentic or interesting at all. So just tell me the straight story. Don't be afraid to kind of share those weaknesses or those ups and downs. We're ready to receive them. With the optional essay, it is just that. I'm just moving through here. Thank you. So with the optional essay, if you do not complete it, don't think that I am thinking any less of you. The best use of the optional essay is a very specific reason that you have determined. You typically, you know, I've never really counted it up, but it feels maybe like 20% of the applications I read, maybe less, are from applicants who fill out that optional essay. It is just that. It is never, ever a space to insert a great piece of writing that you submitted for another school, and you don't want that essay to go to waste. It will not be worth your time to even cut and paste it in there, because that would be just a frustration for me, I would say. The optional essay is just that. Do not use it as a platform to re-emphasize anything else that you have talked about in the application. Please feel welcome to use the optional essay to perhaps explain something that maybe was an outlier in your application. If there were low marks on a transcript, or a poor term during undergrad, and maybe you want to give me a little bit more insight into why that happened. Again, you can do that in a paragraph. You may not need 500 words, but use your best judgment in the amount of real estate that you want to use in that optional essay. But it's a space for explaining or bringing more context to something that you feel wasn't properly, or it wasn't adequately explained earlier on in the application, or you didn't have the chance to adequately explain it earlier. Trying to think of other things. There is some room to explain a job gap, but if you believe it needs more context, that is another good use for the optional essay. Bullet points are welcome. Short paragraphs are welcome. Typically, you don't need 2 pages for explanation, but if you do. So be judicious about that optional essay. One of our team members, as we kind of move through the details of this slide, one of our team members wrote with feedback from our entire committee, the Insider's Guide to the Tuck Essays on the Tuck 360 blog. It is absolutely worth a read, and it spells it out even more so than I have done here. So in the interview, we definitely want to get to know you and as many of you as possible. You have the opportunity for an applicant-initiated interview, and we encourage applicants to self-initiate the interview so you're not waiting for us. We love for you to come and see our campus, but we also know the chances of just passing through Hanover might be rare. So the applicant-initiated interview is a way to make sure you get here. Next bullet, if coming to Hanover is not an option, you could get an interview invitation from the admissions committee. If we read your application and believe you're a strong candidate and you have not initiated an interview, we will invite you. Do we look favorably upon applicants who initiated their own interviews? That definitely depends. We understand that a visit can be difficult due to time and costs. And so we're not going to unfairly penalize you for not coming to campus. Don't feel pressure around the interview. If we invite you to interview, there may also be a virtual option. If we invite you to interview after you have submitted your application, that interview invite does not mean that you have to hurry up and get on a plane and get here. There will often be the virtual option. So most typically via Skype or other ways, but we will communicate with you as to what the options are and when to schedule that. So timing, thinking about that again, if you are invited, the invitation will happen well after the submission deadline. So earlier in the presentation, when I showed you the application dates, which many of you I know are familiar with, or they're easy to access on our website, those key dates, for example, with the early action application date that just passed, which was October 4th, we have yet to issue any invites yet. It just takes time because again, we're going to do a primary read of your application before the interview invites are issued. So we want to help. That's part of the reason why I'm right now talking into my screen at all of you. you can opt into email communications from Tuck. You can attending events like this or attending events when we are in your area. So if you look at the Tuck events calendar, there are still numerous events in the U.S. and globally that we will be leading before kind of that event season comes to a little bit of a close. Even after the admissions committee is kind of our travel will wrap up by the end of October. Even when the admissions committee travel season is done, there are what we call student ambassadors, and student ambassadors and alumni are out and about in maybe in the areas where you live, and they will host coffee chats and small scale events that you can opt into. And so you can keep an eye on the events page, and new events are posted all the time. After the admissions committee travel season draws to a close, like I said, in late fall, many of the other events that happen will happen around student break most often. So when students have that break, second years have a break after the US Thanksgiving holidays, first years have a break later on in December through the new year. At that time, many students are traveling, and we will sponsor the opportunity for the coffee chat. You'll see signups online, so you can definitely stay tuned. Reaching out to students and alumni, that is absolutely possible. Subscribing to Tuck 360, which I mentioned, that's where the guide to the essays is located, and following us on social media and visiting if you are able. So we would love that. So we covered a lot there, and I've come to the close of that. And then here we are back again, and I'm going to take a look at the questions that are here and dive right in. So the first question that I see here, and thank you for submitting all the questions, is how the question is, how do you demonstrate your Tuck fit? For all the Tuck outreach, it seems like that is crucial. Can you give us a few examples that demonstrate fit? I think fit can best be demonstrated by how you identify with the mission at Tuck. The mission at Tuck is to educate wise leaders to better the world of business. The components of the mission, confident humility and empathy and judgment, and how we detail this information. This is information that you can read about on the Tuck website, but also thinking about it for yourself. We ask a question about confident humility. So that is, having an awareness of what you know and what you don't know, and not being hesitant to share that. So confident humility is a component of our mission, and showing how you identify with the Tuck mission, I think, is the best way to demonstrate that fit, because it's hard to quantify, but your connection with the mission is something worth articulating, and can help us understand, or can help us gain an understanding of how well you know Tuck and what you hope to contribute in this fully immersive learning community. So the next question is about goals. How clear or specific do you have to be, considering an MBA program is designed to help you explore diverse opportunities? So as you apply, and as I alluded to in an earlier essay, in an earlier slide, our first essay is asking specifically about, specifically asks you a question about what are your goals. So I want an answer. With that, you don't have to detail every single move, but I don't want a laundry list. So being able to answer a specific question gives me some insight that you have done some reflection and have been able to think about, okay, when I arrive at Tuck, what will I be thinking about? So many applicants are switching careers. So articulating how you're thinking about this switch can be something that can be, it can be hard to articulate, but the research and reflection can be helpful. So I'm asking a specific question, and I would love a specific answer. That said, sharing an idea with me about where you think you are headed is perfectly fine. And I will not hold up your application to the Career Development Office when you said you were thinking about your goals in one way and now you're recruiting for something else. It's absolutely fine to change your mind. But asking that specific question forces you to think about it, which can be really valuable later. When you head into the environment at Tuck, you will not have all the time in the world to pursue every career path that interests you, which is a challenge. So thinking about prior to the start of your MBA, and we require you to answer the question a little bit earlier than maybe some people are comfortable with. But it's a good thing to do for yourself, not just for me as I'm reading your application. Another thought on that is, like I said, it doesn't have to be, all the specifics do not have to be spelled out in order for you to gain admission to Tuck. I would like a thoughtful essay with some detail about your career path. So even if you can't get to, I want to do X thing, let me know what you're thinking about. Help me go down a path with you as I'm reading the application. I am reading your essays and application and asking you these questions because I also want to know, okay, it's not just the academics at Tuck, it's not just life at Tuck, it's also recruiting. You want a great education, you want a great job opportunity. If I have no idea what you're looking for, I am missing a component that is critical to my evaluation of your application. So I will leave it at that. Be as specific as you are comfortable with. And you can definitely explore those diverse opportunities when you come to Tuck. But what you're thinking now may be a good indicator. And what is the inspiration for the MBA? Is it the career switch? And what would that be too? So sharing that with me would just be really wonderful for me to hear. Okay, is the most important information in the what we want to know section expected to be obtained via the interview or the essay? It can be a combination of both, and it doesn't have to be every single bullet point. So thinking about what we're trying to understand about your work experience, I think the leadership is something that will come through. What you have accomplished, we'll be able to hear that in your own words. I feel it naturally comes through when candidates are talking about some of their past experiences. Your recommenders also share some of that with us, and we're able to see that in the application. So as far as how far you go into it in the interview or the essay, know that we are evaluating both. And so if you share some details in the essay, you can then share complementary or additional details in the interview, and all of that will be factored in when we do the holistic review of your application. So another question about how is a letter of support from alumni or students at Tuck evaluated? Can we submit one? So what is required of you are 2 letters of reference from first, trying to go after that supervisor recommendation is very important. If that supervisor happens to be a Tuck alum, that's wonderful, but don't feel like that is not required to be successful in this evaluation process. If you ask for a recommendation from, let me take a step back. There is no need for you to ask for a recommendation from a Tuck student or an alum. You need to focus first on who you're going to ask for your letter of reference, whether that is a Tuckie or not. That's your first job. If there are others who want to chime in on your candidacy, that's fine, but you should not ask them. You should ask for 2 specific letters of reference, and that is it. Do not make a connection in this process and then say, hey, great chatting with you. Will you write me a letter of support? Absolutely do not do that. 9 times out of 10, if you have spoken with a member of this community and they've enjoyed the conversation, excuse me, just gonna get a sip of water, human on the other side here. Oh, thank you. 9 times out of 10, that Tuck community member alum will send a note to me without you even knowing. So one, don't feel like an additional letter from a Tuck community member is something you need or have to go after. Your first job and most important job are the 2 letters of reference. And then next, if you've spoken with someone and they had a great conversation with you, they will just send a note. That is how connected people feel to alums and current students feel to this community. Then, you know, I get a fair number in my inbox throughout the course of an application season. And so that is, again, not something that is going to make or break your admissions decision. And it is not something you have to specifically go after. It can be submitted, but again, your first job are your 2 letters of reference, formal letters of reference. Anything else is additional material that the committee has to evaluate, so be judicious about any additional material that you're sending us that we did not ask for. I think it's time for the smiley face now. So I say all these things with love and care for you as you progress through this complicated process, and I know there can be some stress out there. So, you know, breathe deeply and know that, again, very human on the other side of the process who's evaluating your application and wanting to learn about you. So let me go on to the next question. Okay, so are the letters of recommendation written free form, or does Tuck Admissions email the recommendation questionnaire? Yes. We will, as soon as we have information about who your recommenders are, there is a specific link that is shared with them that is connected to the evaluation form. It is a standard form that we hope all recommenders will fill out and not just submit a free form letter. Again, in having that conversation with your recommenders, as I alluded to earlier in one of the slides, if you're able to have that conversation, please ask them to fill out the form that they receive. The form is a combination of qualitative and quantitative evaluation. There are short answer questions. There are scales of you know, success and behavior in the workplace, and these are different things that we're going to ask them. But we would love for them to fill out that specific form. So they will get a specific questionnaire, and ideally they would fill that out and return it to us. Not to say that if they just, you know, gave us a, you know, check some boxes and decided to do a narrative about your professional performance, that would be interpreted as a negative. They can still provide really great detail, but we'd love for them to focus on the form and the questions first and go from there. So the next question is about interviews. I shared a few details throughout the slide presentation about interviews, and I just want to take a look at. I of course have notes in front of me, trying to remember to share so many details with you. But again, to re-emphasize with the interview, if you are unable to come to campus and self-initiate an interview, that is okay. There are other ways to receive an interview. So one, the interview invitation from the committee will not mirror the dates that you see posted anywhere. It is unpredictable. We first need to receive all of the applications, begin the evaluation process, give your application a first read, and if we believe you are you know, competitive at that time, then we are going to you know, be in touch with you and ask for, the committee will invite you to interview. With that, as I said earlier, the invitation to interview should not be met with, you know, with panic there. You don't have to hurry up and get on a plane and travel or figure out how to get time off from work on a tight timeline. Typically, a remote option will be, a virtual interview will be an option for you among the options. You know, if you're invited to interview, we will give you options. You can come to campus, you can choose a virtual interview, or perhaps one of our admissions team who maybe is traveling in your neck of the woods throughout the later application season and the early round, they may be able to sit down with you remote from Tuck, but in person for you. So there are several different options. When and if you receive your interview invitation, all the options will be laid out to you. But again, if you have submitted your application without self-initiating the interview, you do have to take a bit of a step back and kind of let the committee start the evaluation process, and you will have to wait to be invited. So you have to take a deep breath and a step back, and you do have to wait for us. Applicant invites for interviews are offered at random times. I cannot predict to you at this moment when they will be offered. You just have to take that step back and allow the committee to start the evaluation process, and then we will be in touch. I'm just scrolling through the questions here. So a question about reapplicant strategies. One, Tuck views reapplicants in a positive way, and the other side of that is we look for a lot there. You've gone through the process one time. You should be very clear on the directions and how to answer the questions, and be fairly tuned in. You've gone through the process before. So as you come back to the process as a reapplicant, come back with the same energy, enthusiasm, and even armed with even more facts and more time for reflection, which can make the application stronger. As the question cites here, this particular reapplicant says they've improved some aspects of their application and increased their responsibilities. What can I do to impress Tuck the second time around? Taking the time to reflect on the prior application and what did you perceive as the shortcomings there. Could it have been timing? Could it have been an essay question that wasn't answered? Could it have been the GMAT or the standardized test score? So it sounds to me like the person submitting this question has done some reflection, which that definitely gets a smiley face. I give you that with my full enthusiasm. But then the next piece of my enthusiasm will come through when I take a look at your application and I see that you have come back thoughtfully with even more energy than the first time around. Hopefully that will lead to the interview invitation for you this next time around, because that could be something that really helps. But don't think about impressing me. Think about putting forth a thoughtful effort and the exact portrait, as I said before, of you, and what are the aspects of you that you're excited to share with us. How do you see your alignment with the mission at Tuck, and what aspects of that mission are you really excited to engage with? So those are some things to think about. The question on GPA. So thinking about someone's GPA who has been is post-undergrad, maybe on the higher side of the average for years of work experience, the GPA is something that we have to consider. That coursework, what your track record was, that is something I'm going to consider. But as the question alludes to, it probably has, it seems like some time has passed. So for someone who has already worked for many years, again, it's a holistic process no matter what. If you've worked for many years, you can probably showcase some additional strengths and maybe maturity that perhaps you did not exhibit undergrad if the GPA or performance there wasn't strong. We do consider graduate work about, I think it's just about 12 or 15% of the admitted class at Tuck currently has a master's or additional degree from their undergraduate degree, and that is something that we will look at as well. That is a great credential. It shows us how you are spending your time and trying to improve whatever subject areas were your focus at that time. So that's really positive, and we'll definitely consider that. So again, going back to my thoughts around the holistic process, it is just that. And as these questions are great because you're sharing with me the differences here, and this is what I see reflected in the applicant pool. Some with many years of work experience, some with fewer, some applicants who are coming in with just the undergraduate degree, some with more years of work experience plus a graduate degree, higher GPAs, lower GPAs, higher GMATs, lower GMATs. It's a holistic process, so I'm looking at everything to understand the scope of your interest and your readiness to participate in the community here academically and on all other levels and ways to contribute. So, so we'll look at everything and definitely putting it all into context depending upon how close or far away you are from that undergrad GPA. Good question. A question around experience gained from global exposure, international travel. Does that mean an applicant with no international travel is at a disadvantage? Great question, and one that I have been asked in the past. If you have global exposure, and we ask for, we give you a few prompts there. If you have that global exposure, that's great. You can share some details with me there. If you do not have that global exposure, it does not mean that I will stop reading and you will not be further considered for admission to Tuck. Again, think about that word holistic and try to really take it to heart, because that is how I'm looking at your application, an entire landscape of you in what you have done, what your accomplishments have been, and also what you hope to do. As I said earlier, if every applicant was perfect, there may be no reason for them to decide to come and get their MBAs, to learn anything or to do anything better or to learn any more about themselves. So thinking about the global exposure question, if you have something to put there, that's wonderful. You do not have to embellish an experience that maybe isn't quite global. You don't have to explain why there isn't anything there. At Tuck, there is a global requirement for all students, and that gives you a chance to really dive in and explore and increase your level of global exposure. So that's something that we can help you with. You may have absolutely everything else, and maybe this is the thing that you don't have yet. We will likely be able to understand that through, again, the context of your application. Perhaps you're someone who I can see has, worked through their undergrad and not able to study abroad. So you're working full or part-time while going to school full or part-time. That doesn't allow for much global exposure. Excuse me. No, there's no hiding from you. You get to see it all while we're here live. And then also, so again, with the context, I can see how much people are working. You've shared a lot of details with me. Maybe you worked during your undergraduate degree. Also, your professional experience. Maybe you're in one of those high intensity careers where it's easy for me to see, and you have shown me that you're working X number of hours per week that perhaps because of the career track you're on doesn't allow for the global exposure or even for enough vacation time. So again, humans on the other side evaluating your application, we will be able to gain the context of everything. Don't feel like something has to be made up for that question if you don't have anything to put there. Yeah, so does this mean an applicant with no international travel is at a disadvantage? Again, a holistic process where you're able to share a lot more than just that one measure for me to be able to see that you are capable and ready to contribute here. So it's not anything that would make me just deny your application. So I see we're getting the memo that we have just a few minutes left, and I have more to say if my voice will allow me to do that. And one thing that excuse me. One thing that we didn't talk about that I'll just touch on a little bit here, and some of you may have already read about it or learned about the evaluation process, but in thinking about the process of your application. There are 10 application readers on our admissions team, and they're all evaluations are done by our staff. And so 10 members of the team, we receive your applications, and then we randomize the distribution of the application to decrease bias in the process. We do have team members who have particular expertise internationally and will be a reader on that particular file, but we'll also have a second reader chiming in. All admitted students will have interviewed either at their prerogative if they chose to schedule an interview, or at ours with the interview invite. So that's a piece of the process too. The final, members of our committee will read and evaluate your application, but the final read and final decision will sit with our executive director. When he receives that application, he is also reviewing all of the information that has been submitted and summarized by the prior readers. And at that time, he may have enough information to say admit, deny, or waitlist. He may also be in a position where he wants to send that to committee. So many of the applications every round are sent to committee, which is just that. Many of us sitting around a table 4 days at a time reviewing absolutely every application that is kind of in that committee process. So that's an application that seems very competitive and seems like we're going to make an offer there, but then there is that comparison to the overall pool. So 1 to 2 readers of the application, their summary and recommendations are then submitted finally to our executive director. Executive director makes a call there. Is there a final decision that he can make, or is this going to go into the larger committee discussion? Now you know a little bit as to why, if you submit the application on October 4th, you don't get your decision until mid-December, because it takes a while. Readers, our team of readers, I am one of them. We recommend more people than we have the opportunity to enroll at Tuck, and so that's why there is a very robust discussion within the committee room. The committee reviews each remaining application, and then the committee will decide at that time what the decision is, admit, waitlist, or deny. We don't have any quotas. We don't have any, predetermined notions about what the perfect class looks like. Again, perfect people, perfect applicants don't exist. The perfect class doesn't. It's the combined skills and experiences and desire to be at Tuck that make the class complete and help us bring it together. So there, I'm just gonna pause for a second. A lot of information came your way. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for all the effort that you've put into this process. As I said at the beginning, you're trying to work full-time jobs and have a life, and then this application process comes along and it takes over maybe every free moment that you once had. So though you may not feel it as strongly as the effort you've already put in, we do give you that energy and effort and holistic, thorough, full evaluation on the other side. And that's why it takes us some time. So thank you for giving us that time to work through our process and communicate with you as we need to. I just say I love the team that I work with. I love my job, and I'm thrilled to hear from so many of you, and I'm very, very interested in your stories and why you want to be at Tuck. So please share them, and you know how to there are numerous ways to get in touch with me, with our committee, and we're happy to hear from you along the way. So just at about 12:59, and I don't see any other questions, and so so I'm going to sign off from here. Wish you all the best in this process. Hope you can take a deep breath as you progress through. It's a lot to do. And so we're thinking about you and just wish you the absolute best of luck. Thank you so much for your interest in Tuck, and we hope to hear from you.